Museum of History Studios. You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special Addressing Gettysburg. I don't know why I couldn't remember the name of the show there. I was going to say Ask a Guide, but it's really not an Ask a Guide. One of the things that the taking the guide exam taught me, and I think some other people, is that in our preparation for it, we spent too much time on the Battle of Gettysburg and not enough time on the rest of the war, Reconstruction, park history, all these other things. And so you're going to see in the coming years that the scope of what we cover here on Addressing Gettysburg is going to spread out to other areas of the Civil War. Not go away from Gettysburg, but we're going to, every once in a while, we're going to dip our toe into other ponds. But there is a connection, actually, maybe more than one connection do we have here? I think just we have that one.
There's a few Gettysburg connections.
There's a few Gettysburg connections here. And we're talking about something that most people have never heard of because it's really a small action. It's called the Battle of Parson's Mill. I don't know, though, that really if that we really should call it a battle. But I guess like my grandfather said, he was in World War II, and he said, Matt, when a bullet whizzes past your head, someone's shooting at you in anger, it's a battle.
Right.
You're in a war. You're in a war.
No different than, the cavalry soldiers here in the Gettysburg campaign, battles at Westminster, Hanover, Hunterstown,
right.
Star's men at Fairfield, those 200 something guys that are killed, captured, or wounded. That's a battle.
That's a battle.
That was their Gettysburg.
It's of course not on the scale of Gettysburg, but it's a battle nonetheless.
Yeah,
and
it surrounds Wilson's Creek.
And it's an interesting one. For those of you who listen to the show a lot, that one of my other favorite battles to talk about is the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Jim Hessler and I have done a show about it. We just went and did last month. We went and did the History Things podcast. We did an episode with them about the Battle of the Little Bighorn. We love talking about that battle. This is another one of those battles that just kind of interests me because there's a lot of, it's got a little bit of everything. It's got some arrogant commanders. It's got some foolish commanders. It's got some capable commanders, but it's early war. So, everybody hasn't really fleshed themselves out yet, and so it's interesting there. Also, the way the units are organized at the time is a little different than what we're used to later on. Maybe some of the weaponry, things like that. Like, for example, the cavalry that's here is really more like mounted infantry. They're not carrying carbines. They're carrying really whatever they could get their hands on.
It's a mix of arms.
Yeah, it's a mix of arms. And they're used like mounted infantry for the most part. Anyway, Parsons Mill. So Mikey B is here. He's the one who turned me on to this. And it was one of our patrons, actually, who is also a friend of yours.
Who I didn't know was a patron. So all credit to Peter Novak. Who lives out in Missouri, or Missouri, as he calls it. Who, when I was in the Air Force in Wichita Falls doing training there in Texas, that's how I know him. We've kept in touch. And I guess on my Facebook, I posted about coming on here and helping you with some things. And he's like, I love addressing Gettysburg.
Yeah.
He's like, I saw Matt starting to do things outside of Gettysburg. You've got to do Parson's Mill.
And you were like, what?
I've never even heard of it.
Never heard of it.
He's like, oh, it's part of the Wilson's Creek campaign and blah, 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 blah. And he's giving me names. And I'm like, okay.
It's like, I never heard.
Give me a book.
Right.
He's like, well, it's one of those things, just the way it happens, the size of it happening the day before what's considered a major battle in that area. It's just not as well written or researched, but he's been doing research for 10 years or so. So he gave us a lot of information. Yeah. You and I have spent a couple weeks on the side digging through things and we piece it together.
I have to say, he's spent, what'd you say, how many years did you say? 10 years?
He's done 10 years.
He's been
to the archives in Jefferson City. Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Missouri?
capital.
Yep. Yeah. So he's been there. And what's great there is, Missouri being one of those states that was supplying troops to both sides.
Yeah.
It's very neutral in its own way there. They have a lot of information on both of those sides. And that's kind of where we get most of this information from.
So Parson's Mill is, prior to it, it's just a little mill. There's a guy, Parson, he's got a farm, he's got a mill, he's got neighbors. Buckman is one of them. Chambers is another. Mm-hmm. just like any other place, it's just home to these people. Not, obviously not built to be a battlefield or anything like that, but it ends up being one. And it's kind of interesting. It's truly a meeting engagement, I would imagine, right? That we would say
Absolutely
that it really is a meeting engagement. Like,
not often in war, you don't plan on running into the enemy,
right?
But sometimes there's a goal. Neither of these two units are on combat type missions. As we'll talk about, one's on a kind of a reconnaissance thing. The other side is just trying to join an army for what they know is going to be an upcoming offensive attack. And they literally, as you do, bump into each other when you're out in the countryside.
So it's located 4 miles south of Springfield, Missouri. Mm-hmm. It's near what is today called Prairie View Heights.
Yes, and the thing about the battlefield today is, if you've ever been to Fredericksburg, where you're at the wall and it's like
people's backyards.
Right. The only things that are really remaining there, the mill is just the old stone remnants of it. Yeah. That's pretty much it.
So, and the bridge is still there, but it's a modern bridge because now it's a road, a modernized road. So let's get into some of the people here. So our belligerents, if you will.
Sure.
We've got the Union commander, and forgive me for having to refer to my notes because this is all new and I don't have it memorized yet. Colonel Sebastian Letou. What a great French name that is.
He is French.
Well, that would make sense then. He's got one brigade composed of 4 companies of the 3rd U.S. Infantry under Captain Andrew Jacobson of Culp's Hill fame, and the 6th Missouri Infantry under Colonel David Myrie, for a total of about 1,100 men. Okay, so small unit.
We'll say brigade. It's really a moving column.
Right. He's just kind of in charge of the column as these guys are going to reinforce line.
And there's some contention there, both being colonels, and there's some things haven't really been decided when it comes to seniority. Lyon is in command of the district in the area. Of course, spoiler alert, he's going to die the next day at Wilson's Creek. So
thanks.
You're so very welcome. But there's some contention there about who is really in charge of this column and what's going on.
So let's get into, because there is a little bit of a backstory here with Myrie and what's his name, Letou.
We can talk about both of them if you want to.
Let's do that right now, though. Because I think this will be good to know the backstory so that when we hear what happens later, the audience hears what happens later.
You want me to tell them about how they meet each other, their background?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So Letou, as you can tell by his French name, is French. His parents are French. A lot of military families like Letou or like Gettysburg. Can you think of a Frenchman at Gettysburg?
Régis de Tribriand.
Correct. And they actually know each other, which we'll talk about in a second. A lot of those families that have those rich military histories, they'll come after the fall of Napoleon or maybe just the overchange that's going on in France. And his family's going to settle in the St. Louis area. He is very involved in social circles, which is how he knows Régis, by going out to New York in that French type community with that military background. Mm-hmm. When Lyon takes command in St. Louis, I think it's sometime in the summer of 61, Letou is a very well-known figure in the area. Charismatic, handsome guy. So he's well-established in the St. Louis area. David Myrie is very wealthy. His father was a shipping merchant on the Mississippi River. David's going to inherit that from him. So that typical silver spoon family, silver spoon type attitude.
Of course.
He inherits that company, kind of like the Vanderbilts, really moving a lot of freight up and down the rivers. He has enough money that when the war breaks out, he's going to almost pay for the entirety of raising that regiment himself, the 6th Missouri. So he's going to contribute to the funding for arms, for equipment. He's going to pay for a lot of the rations and stuff when they're in camp. And he is named the colonel of the unit, kind of like Wadsworth, makes some contributions. Yeah, sure. Except Wadsworth turns out to be a little better commander,
a little more competent.
Yeah, absolutely. And these two, I can't remember her name.
Let me see. I have Miss Elizabeth Jane Krenwinkel.
Right.
They had both been vying for her hand. They were rivals for the love of a woman, for possession of a woman's heart.
It's very Beverly Robertson, James Yule Brown Stewart.
Right. And Letou won.
Yes. Letou marries her, I think, in 59 or 60. I don't remember.
I don't remember if I read that ever. But he wins. Myrie can't hack it. He can't take it. It's an embarrassment. I think Letou from okay, at least the way I picture it in my head, I don't really know if this is true about them, but from the way the research that Peter gave us, it seems to me like Latou's a little more refined. Myri is more like almost like maybe like a Custer type or a Stewart type, like a little more impetuous, a little full of himself. He is, right? He's
had everything growing up.
Yeah,
Latou's family came over and had to restart.
Yeah,
so there's a big difference in their upbringing.
Right? They like Latou. He like maybe that's what it is. Is Myri resents because he's nouveau riche.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Myri's old money.
Yep.
And so he sees Latou's refinement as play acting almost, right? He doesn't really. And
Latou's accent probably helps a little bit too.
Yeah. Of course. So anyway, so that's what the backstory is between them, right? And then of course Myri doesn't think that he should be in charge of this column, or that Latou should be in charge of the column. He thinks he should be, but it's not like you were saying before, it's not a real command. It's just these two units have to go and meet the main body of the army.
Yes.
And Latou was given command of the column as it's on the march. They're slated to join other brigades once they're there.
That's correct. Yeah. Once they reach the army, which again, spoiler, is going to be attacking the next day.
So really, you could think of it as Latou's in command of the march.
Yes. Okay.
All right. So there we go with that. Now, some of the things on the Confederate side that we need to know about here, okay? You've got Colonel Bradley Evans of the Missouri State Guard, and he's in command of these units here now. So you've got the 5th Missouri State Guard Infantry under Lieutenant Colonel Casey Keller, and Scott's Cavalry under Major Zachary Scott. A total of 650 men, 140 of those are the cavalry. But remember, the cavalry is more like mounted infantry.
Yes, and this is a very loose grouping of cavalry. In fact, Scott's rank as major is our best guess. Someone calls him major. He ends up being wounded at the Battle of Pea Ridge the next year, and then he just disappears. We don't know anything else about him. We know that the cavalry unit was known as Scott's Cavalry and that he was in charge of it.
I remember Peter was saying he was trying to find if anybody who had served with Scott had ever left anything, that mentions him, and he like scoured a whole bunch of letters and
it's
diaries.
Just that one letter from his man that calls him the major, and that could have been a term of endearment,
right?
We don't.
Like Colonel Sanders wasn't really a colonel.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So now there's a few points of interest, and I'll direct you to this map. Now, okay, before we get to the map, I have to tell you there are no maps of this battle. So Mike did a really good job, and you're going to look at it, you're going to think a child did it because it's done in what, like Microsoft Paint or something?
I used Photoscape, which I've been using for like 20 years.
Photoscape. Okay, so he made this map out of Photoscape. Free app. But it gets the point across, right? Okay, so don't make fun of him too much when you see it. But it's the only way we could, there's no visual representation of this battle that we could find. Again, because it's overshadowed.
To be fair, I made it for us.
Well,
me being vulnerable to the crowd I'm willing to pay that price.
Yes, you did make it for us. And I did say, even though it looks like a child did it, it actually is good because as we were reading about all this.
Man did do it though. So kind of like a child did.
You're not that short. No, but I think it's a good job because as we were reading it, this is how I developed the picture in my head. Yeah.
It's kind of like when you take a photo and you go out to the battlefield and you look at that same rock, it's that connection. It's like, okay, I see it now. Or when we saw Gettysburg when we were kids, I can see the battlefield now because I know what combat looks like. This map.
Exactly. Now, which way? Okay, so let's go to the map now, editor. All right, so here we are, our child map. Now, Mike, so which way is north? Is like
it's directional. So up is north.
Up is north. Okay, so up is north. So we have Buckman's Woods. You can see Latou and his column coming in here on the road. This is the Appleton Pike or Appleton Road.
What we would consider the quote unquote start of the engagement kind of starts like this. Yes.
Right. We've got the 6th Missouri in line first, and then the 3rd U.S. is behind them. Okay. So now outside of Buckman's Woods, we have the Parson House and Barn, and then there's Parson's Mill right along Taylor's Creek. Over here, we've got Chambers's Bridge, and there's the Chambers Farm. And this is Tanner's Ridge, which overlooks the creek and the plain here between the creek and Buckman's Woods and beyond. Okay. And then over here is the Buckman house. He owns the woods and other stuff. Now, over here on the left is the logging trail that goes to Winslow's Ford. That's going to come into play later on as well.
Yep, and all those are associated with families in the area, except for Tanner's Ridge. We have no clue why it was known as Tanner's Ridge.
Right. We don't know if it was like a family name or if there was a tannery there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So here's kind of what goes on, and I'll leave the map up here for now, so that as we mention geographical sites, it'll make sense to you. Okay. So the Confederates. Like we said before, the Union troops are on their way to link up with Lyon. The Confederates are on a reconnaissance towards Springfield, while the main body of the Confederate Army is camped
so Sterling
near
Price
Wilson's Creek.
Sends them a bit north, and their intention is to kind of loop back around and meet back up with the camp. Obviously, they're checking the main roads, and they kind of find what they're looking for when it comes to that.
So now, as Latou's column moves along the Appleton Pike, Scott's cavalry was sent ahead to Tanner's Ridge to just observe, see if there's anything up there. And he does observe something. And as you can see, Buckman's Woods is kind of just like a little island of trees, a little wood lot. And the Appleton Pike goes through a portion of it. And so beyond it, so if you're looking to where the columns are here, or the column is here, this area out this way is all just kind of open fields, farm fields and whatnot. And it's very visible from Tanner's Ridge. If you go there today, you can still see some of that open space out there. So Scott's cavalry sees Latou coming before Latou enters the woods. So Scott sends word back to Evans, and he says, Evans, we got some Yankees coming up the road. Okay. So Evans is like, we'll be right there. They're not far away anyway. So Evans decides, now Evans knows this area well enough, and he knows that a little off map here to the south, the road actually forks. He's on the Appleton Pike, but there's a little it's more of a turn off really that takes you to this logging trail or road. And it's basically a farm lane that all the farmers use to connect to each other. So the area they're at,
the Confederates were stationary for a couple of hours. This was like a quick bivouac on the way. So they had a look around. The ridge was one of the highest points in the area, so a great place for observation. So they do have the advantage of knowing that ground, even just for 2 hours, which is a big advantage over the Union force approaching.
No, exactly, because he knows enough that Wilson's Ford is off to the left here. So he's coming up with, who's a Keller, right? Casey Keller. So Casey Keller's got a regiment. And so Evans orders him to take 2 of the battalions of the regiment towards the left, towards the west, and take Winslow's Ford and halt once getting across there until the situation develops. And then he can go up and find out what's going on. So then Evans takes the remaining battalion up to Tanner's Ridge to reinforce Scott. Actually, I think he took him up with him, but he went on Tanner's Ridge to see, but he put the reinforcements, I think, by somewhere the Chambers farm or behind the ridge or something like that. Yeah. Okay. Now Scott, in the meantime, and let's see here if I have another map that's a little more detailed. Yes. Okay. So now Scott moves his men towards the bridge because obviously the Union wants to cross the bridge.
Yeah. Right? And again, it's important. This is not a typical cavalry. This is not your Stuart Black Horse cavalry 1861 look. It is a bunch of guys with horses that they've probably brought from home. With a mix of arms. So they're going to dismount. The best show of forces for them to kind of group together near this bridge. Right. And that's their goal.
And I think he actually sends some skirmishers across the bridge to kind of slow the advance of the column in the fields north of the bridge.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So now, and obviously we haven't been there, but Peter did send us some pictures of some of the points of interest, the bridge included, from the Union perspective. And it reminded me of is when you go to Burnside's bridge from the Union side. The terrain is similar in the sense that you've got an open field on the Union side, and this bridge, and then bluffs on the Confederate side. Of course, you got Tanner's Ridge there. So, it's...
And even though there's homes up there today, you can still see it's a pretty imposing ridge.
Yeah. We should have had those pictures here. But I deleted them. Anyway, so the Confederate script. Now, okay, so now here's where the drama begins over on the Union side.
Excited.
Yes, this is exciting. Okay. Latou, he's riding in the center of the column, I think, or is it the rear of the column?
Yeah, he's somewhere near the rear. We aren't exactly sure.
But he's not up with Myrie.
No. So everything we're getting from this is what Jacobson writes in his book. And also Latou's adjutant, I don't remember his name. We're getting that from. He just knows he's not at the head of the column. So Myrie's up there by himself. Right. So
Myrie's up there. Impetuous Myrie. Don't forget that. Impetuous Myrie is up there by himself.
Who paid for his regiment, who's going to command it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's my regiment. These are my men shooting my guns, wearing my uniforms.
Yep.
All right. So Myrie comes out of the woods. Pop, pop, pop. There's a few Confederate skirmishers that are north of the bridge that start firing.
Mm-hmm.
So Myrie immediately halts the column, or his men. There's a bit of a gap, as you can see on the map. Myrie halts his men and forms them into line. And immediately it orders their advance.
Yes.
Okay. Well, they load, but then orders their advance.
Yep.
And they start advancing across the field. Well, as they get closer to the bridge, now some of the Confederates who are on the opposite side of the creek start opening fire.
Mm-hmm.
So the cacophony of pop, pop, pops is getting
become
bigger.
Noticeable.
Yes. Latou can hear this from wherever the hell he is.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, what is this? No words coming back to me, et cetera, et cetera. He rides up ahead. Yeah. What is this? Quoi is this? Is that French? Quoi?
Sure.
Yeah.
It is now.
All right. So he rides up ahead and he sees Myrie all on his horse and everything, behind his men, and they're marching forward in good order. And
he sees a deployed regiment moving on its own to attack
with this a-hole.
Yeah.
With
all due respect.
With all due respect to him. He sends an aide to run up and fetch Myrie.
Yeah.
Now Myrie's behind his men, so he doesn't have the embarrassment of, his men seeing this, but the aide gets him. Myrie comes back. I always wondered this, we probably don't know. Does he let any of his subordinate officers, like a major or whatever, know that
it's not that far of a distance?
Yeah.
So they're already moving on their own. He's basically gets called back. So it's not that far.
Okay,
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if he says anything to anyone. They're moving forward, but yeah, he's going to come back and report to Latou.
So he goes back to Latou. Latou is livid. Yeah. Right?
And this
Talk
is where
about
his
that a little
adjutant
bit.
says you can see the character of the man. I think he says something like that.
Yeah.
Latou is pissed. And he's slipping in between the English curse words and the French curse words.
Right.
He's really letting him have it. And if there was any question of who was in command of this column, Latou was going to put that to rest right there. So they're going to have a shouting match, basically.
Now, meanwhile, Myrie's men are in line. They're getting closer to the Confederates. Mm-hmm. And it kind of they just start firing, right? And they start firing back and forth at each other.
The
engagement begins, okay? Hearing the sound of the firing, Casey Keller over on the left with his 2 battalions, he rides up ahead of them because he's ordered to kind of hold them after crossing the ford. He rides up ahead so that he can kind of peek around the ridge and get a view, and he can see what's going on, and he sees this perfect opportunity. Now, Latou, when he was yelling at Myrie, there's a good line he has.
What happened is, I think.
Oh, no, wait, we didn't get there yet. Hold on, wait. I'm sorry. We didn't get there. I'm sorry. I'm ahead of myself because I'm okay. Back to Confederates. Okay.
Yeah.
So Keller sees there's an opportunity to hit Myrie in the flank.
Yes.
Okay. Now this is happening probably, we guess, or Peter guesses, and we agree with him.
Simultaneously.
While Latou is yelling at Myrie.
Right.
Okay.
Or at least certainly while Myrie's advancing.
Yeah. So Keller doesn't wait for orders or anything. He sees the opportunity to do something, and he orders his men forward. What's the first one he deploys? He deploys the fifth?
Well,
no,
it is his regiment is the fifth.
It is the. Oh, right. I'm sorry. So he right. That's
and
right.
he is under orders, and the orders. He writes. It's a letter to his wife. He says he was told to take advantage of whatever situation develops in Scotland.
That's right. That's right.
So
Okay.
Evans gave him like, hey, go around there, cross the creek,
keep an
You have
eye
a
on things,
chance.
and do something.
go for it. And this is his chance.
So he does. And so he takes one of his battalions and deploys them and moves against the right flank of Myri's line.
Yes, and it's as he's coming up around that creek is when he's going to be spotted by one of Latou's officers.
Right. Okay. So that's probably this map here that we're looking at, right?
Yep.
Okay. So now, as you can see on the map, here comes the 5th Missouri State Guard. All right, under Keller. They're on their way. Latou, I mean, in my mind, they're somewhere here around the tree line.
Mm-hmm.
And he's yelling at Myri. And while he's yelling, one of his staff officers just happens to glance over and sees Keller's line or Keller's men coming over.
400 or 500
right.
men.
Right.
It's not small.
It's not small potatoes.
Yeah.
So he calls it to Latou's attention, and Latou's got this great line. He drops the matter with Myri, and he says, well, it appears the die has been cast. Look to your colors. And I always thought that was strange. Look to your colors, because that's what an officer would say to the men, right? Look to the colors.
Yeah. Is it like a passive aggressive thing?
That's what I think.
Because that's what we're thinking. Not like, he can't say, you dumbass, look, what have you done?
Right.
So it's like, you little peasant. You cause this. You get the dog, rub its face in the pig. Right. Now go fix this while I try and figure out what the hell I'm going to do.
Exactly. And so Myri rides up to his men. And now, so he sees this threat coming, but he doesn't do anything right away to meet it, because the fight with the cavalry or the dismounted infantry across the creek is pretty hot.
It is. He also has a pretty large regiment. Again, he might think, I can handle this. Sure, there's more coming, but, it's his first battle. It's his men. He's ready for it. He wants it.
Right. But what is it? Yeah, because you're right. His regiment's what, like 800 something men?
Yes, it's a very large.
Because the U.S., the 3rd U.S. is only 3 companies.
A couple companies.
So it's not even a full regiment there. And so it's an 1,100 man force. Like the bulk of it is obviously going to be the 6th Missouri.
It is a very out of camp regiment.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So he doesn't really know how to use it just yet, right? And it's early on in the war, so you give him a break,
and
right?
He's not a military man.
And he's not a military man.
Correct.
Just goes to show, just because you have the money doesn't mean you you deserve to do it,
Yeah, Daniel Sickles.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just kidding.
No, we love Dan Sickles, of course. So anyway, so he's continuing to pay more attention to Scott's cavalry across the creek. And that allows Keller to actually get online.
Yeah.
And then they start to advance. Now, so I guess it's like from my understanding of it is when they're to the east of Parson's Mill. So if you're looking at the map, to the right of Parson's Mill, like probably out here in the field somewhere, this is when they get online. This is when Myri sees them again, and now they're in line, and he goes, I should probably do something.
Yeah. The best guess is Keller, and again, from the Confederate side, Keller is what we have, and it's his letters that are in the archives to his wife. Probably moves really quick. This is probably a very developing thing, 10, 15 minutes at the most from the time they see the Confederates until they're already engaged. There they go, moving forward.
Moving forward there.
Yep.
And then here. Okay, now, wait, I don't want to give it away yet, so we'll just go back here. So, Keller's going to move forward and fire on the flank of Myri. Now, Myri is going to, I think, I always got confused at this point here. Does he order his line refused, but the execution of it screws up?
Okay, so we see the attack. If you go back to that next one,
okay,
I think that's going to start to show what happens. I think the next 2 maps show it, right? So this is where you can see Keller is actually going to split his force. He's got 2 battalions with him. One is under Marshall, who he's going to send forward, and he's going to leave the other one kind of out adrift to the left. That Keller's going to stay personally with. I think this is probably about when Myri starts to realize, okay, this is not a good situation.
Right.
We all know the 20th Maine refused the flank. He doesn't order them to refuse the flank. His concept is, okay, the cavalry on the other side of the creek is the lesser of the 2 evils to deal with. So he attempts to wheel his entire 800 something man regiment to the rear. Okay. Now, if you do this with this pen, it's very simple. If you're trying to do it with a line of, an 800 something man regiment, it's going to get ugly. Now you could do this by companies. They would have drilled this many times in camp, but they're not getting shot at in camp. And things get very different when you see the guy you grew up with or your brother.
This is their first time under fire, right?
This is their first time under fire.
Okay.
So the orders maybe make sense, but the time and place and how it's happening is very confusing. And you have individual companies kind of doing different things.
Now, there's an important thing that we forgot to mention before. When Latu is yelling at Myrie, right? He goes back to Jacobson, who's still coming through the woods, and he halts him in the woods.
Yep.
And as you can see on the map here, he tells him, get into the woods, form your line in the woods, but make sure you're, concealed, like stay in the woods. And he basically gives him essentially the same order that Evans gave Keller, which is if you see an opportunity, take it. Right.
What Jacobson's book says, engage at this is Jacobson's words, engage at the opportune moment should it present itself.
So this is now developing to a point where it's about to present itself, because what's going on here is and I think the timing we might have a little off in the map here, right? Because isn't the 2nd Battalion of Keller's and there would be the guys on the left flank that Keller stays with, they don't move in. Do they move in?
No.
After Myrie readjusts?
It's as Myrie's line is going into that flux is when Keller says, that's when I saw an opportunity.
Got it.
He used, what did he say? He said, he talked about the right flank being so inviting. He called Major Marshall to deploy his battalion. But then after that, he ends up going around that left, and he just sees an opportunity to destroy Myrie, basically.
Yeah. So he brings them in, and now Myrie is kind of like, now it's kind of a mob, right? It's just like a clump of soldiers.
It's individual companies almost operating without a leader.
Yeah.
He's in the rear. He doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
He doesn't know where Jacobson is.
Well, at this point though, has Latu replaced him yet?
No. Spoiler alert.
Sorry, guys.
So Latu is basically observing from his point in the woods.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So Latu is going to go forward and basically take command of Myrie's regiment away from him. So now Latu is basically commanding what he can and trying to organize the 6th Missouri best he can as Keller is coming down on his right flank.
Yeah. So big mess. And I think that's why I like this fight here, because in some ways it reminds me of the Little Bighorn, where like Custer is surrounded. And, there's a point where he probably stopped trying to maintain order, and it became every man for himself. And it was just a mess. And that's kind of what it sounds like happens here, is that these guys are just, they're surrounded on 3 sides, basically. And there is an out, and some men start taking it now. So they're taking heavy casualties now from across the creek, from right in their new front, and then now on their right flank again. And so you're taking wounded, killed, and now some of your guys are starting to flee.
Yes.
And Latu is trying his best to hold it all together.
Yeah.
But what really helps it is when Jacobson takes the opportunity he sees. What happens with him?
Correct. And you have to think, how desperate is the moment that the overall commander is going to go out there by himself and not inform Jacobson, hey, you can go in now. So it's really Jacobson's initiative, a la Culp's Hill, as we all know. He's going to see that open flank on the left of Keller now. So if you can imagine Keller's coming around, he's going to be able to come right out of those woods, come to the edge of the woods and start to open fire on Keller. Basically, Keller's left and rear now. Keller, who is now thinking, I'm going to be the hero of this battle. I've got them on the run. Suddenly now has maybe 250 United States regulars in his left and rear. There we go.
Yeah, so here we go. We see Jacobson now. He's starting to move out of the woods. He gets to the line of woods. Did you mention the volley? I'm sorry.
Yes, he's going to fire that first volley from the woods.
Yes. And then he's going to move forward. He orders the men to fix bayonets.
Yes.
And
they do that before they engage.
Well, right.
Yes.
Okay. So now they're coming in, and is Keller or anybody that we know of aware that this is happening in their rear?
So Keller's letters to the letter to his wife, and again, we don't have any after action report stuff because there's a big battle that happens the next day. So Sterling Price doesn't really write about what happens here. He's really concerned about his big victory at Wilson's Creek. Keller doesn't talk so much about how it goes wrong or why it goes wrong. He just says the day doesn't go as we planned from this point on. So Jacobson basically says he catches them completely unaware and off guard, saying that it was almost the most perfect scenario for his men. So we can assume that Keller was ill-prepared and, again, goes from the hero to, oh, crap. Now what the hell are we supposed to do? How many are there in these woods?
Now they at this point now there's another battalion across the creek.
Correct.
Of infantry.
Yeah, Keller's third, the battalion that's under Evans' direct control.
Does he do anything with them?
No. Well, when the Confederate line starts to fall apart, I think Evans can clearly see that sending anyone else across the creek is going to be a pointless endeavor.
Right.
By this point, you have that 5th Missouri Home Guard fleeing the field, jumping into the creek, getting across the creek, a la Ball's Bluff, going back to where they came, the logging trail back to the ford. It's almost a total rout of that regiment. Evans is going to use that 3rd Battalion of Infantry to basically be a show of force on the front of the ridge to make sure that Latou can't follow up on his victory on that side of the creek.
So then Latou's forces pull back to the woods.
Yes, Latou's knows he has a completely destroyed regiment. He just removed his most senior commander from command, essentially.
Yeah.
He's in no shape to continue doing anything or even attempt to try and do their initial goal, which was to join Lyon's army. So yeah, they're going to go back to the woods. Evans is going to stay there on the ridge, reinforce the bridge with that infantry, and they're both going to ride out the rest of the afternoon into the evening in those positions before the next day when they go their separate ways.
So neither force was able to participate in the Battle of Wilson's Creek.
No. In which case, you could probably consider that a Confederate success.
Yeah, I mean,
outnumbered 2-1, and they can prevent 1,000-something men from joining.
Sure,
Lyon.
but it's interesting because if you just take this battle alone, I would call it you could either call it a draw, or maybe even a Union victory.
It's an Antietam,
almost.
Right? It's in the eye of the beholder, I suppose.
I guess. I mean, neither one leaves the field per se.
No.
Nobody gains ground.
No.
They just stop each other in their tracks.
Yeah, they meet each other, punch each other in the nose.
Yeah, and then sit there on the other side of the bar, opposite sides of the bar, going, "What'd you do that for, dude? That was a joke."
Texting her wife, "You wouldn't believe what just happened."
Yes. Yeah. Now, casualties. Everybody loves casualties. And these are pretty typical for a Civil War battle. We got a Union casualties, a total of 852. That's 600 killed, 152 wounded, 0 captured.
Yep.
And then the Confederates have 295 total, 280 wounded, 5 killed, 10 captured.
Correct.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a little peek into another part of the Civil War that we don't always hear about.
Do you want the after battle about the people we talked about real quick?
Sure, go ahead.
So Sebastian Latou dies of pneumonia in December of 61. Myrie, who was removed from command, is going to resign the next week from his command.
So his command that my money paid for and all this stuff, he's like, I resign.
He's pissed. Well, it's complicated. Lyon dies at Wilson's Creek.
Right.
It's a lot of things going on at once, and he just wants no part in it. He's not happy with the decisions that were made. He will, however, come back into service in the militia, becoming a colonel of militia in 63 and 64, and he's a big part of recruiting efforts in 63, 64, 65 in the Missouri area. So he stays involved, but he's never going to see combat again. On the Confederate side, Bradley Evans is killed at the Battle of Pea Ridge with the Missouri Guard. Casey Keller is wounded at the same battle of Pea Ridge and gets discharged. The letters that we have, thank you, Peter Novak, again, because we wouldn't know much about the Confederate side at all.
Seriously.
Without those.
Thanks, Pete.
And then Scott, who commands the cavalry, we couldn't find anything about him. Like I said, we're not even sure if he was a major. His unit kind of gets grouped into a partisan ranger battalion type thing.
Okay.
Who stay with the army. They go to Pea Ridge. We don't know if he's there. That's about all we know about them.
That's interesting. Well, then let's thank again your friend Peter Novak for turning us onto this and helping us. A fellow Pole?
Yeah.
Oh, is Novak a Polish name? Oh, I didn't know that.
N-O-W-A-K.
Actually, yeah, I knew a Novak and he was Polish. Yeah. Okay. I don't know why. It just didn't sound it at the moment.
A Polish patron named Novak. You should know these.
I know. Well, now I do. Thank you, Peter Polish Novak. How's that?
His new name.
That's his new name. All right. That's it, though, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you would continue to listen to Addressing Gettysburg as we explore the rest of the Civil War. And, of course, the best way to do that is become a patron over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg, where we really get our hands dirty. Until next time, see you later and stuff. All right. That was good. Oh. We'll call them. I missed the call. No? April Fools!
Hi, Mom. I'm on TV. We just made the whole thing up.
We did. We made that up. There was no Battle of Parson's Mill, but there should have been. There should have been.
It would have been cool.
Did we record this? Oh, yes, we did.
Oh, yeah.
Happy April Fool's Day, everybody.
Our hearts so stout have got us fame, for soon 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa or drink down